So I would technically now give the word of closing remarks to Dr. Elson, who's been the co-director of PhiLab with Jean-Marc Fontan. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Elson has been at the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria, the Institute of Community Prosperity at Mount Royal University. And he's also been the English language editor of Answer, J, the Journal Association for Nonprofit and Social Economic Research from 2010 to 2015. He's also active in numerous provincial and national committee. One of his latest book is Funding Policies and the Nonprofit Sectors in Western Canada, published by the University of Toronto Press. And you might want to correct me on this one, Peter, but you've also been part of the Special Senate Committee on the Charitable Sector, right? If I'm correct.
No, I'm a member. I'm a member of the Advisory Committee on the Charitable Sector to the Minister of Revenue.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. My apologies. And the floor is yours.
Hey, don't worry about it. No, it's all good.
The floor is yours, Peter.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'd first like to say that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, specifically the Songhees Nation here in Victoria, British Columbia. I was raised in Algonquin territory. I've also spent time in Treaty 7 territory, but I've made my home here in Lekwungen territory for the last 6 years. I'd like to also thank Manuel for the opening acknowledgement that he provided at the beginning of the conference. It was very inclusive, and I think his invitation for all of us to think about the traditional territory that we're on still stands. We should still be thinking about it even now, and continue to do so in a good way. I think the whole issue of place-based philanthropy as a phenomenon, it speaks in some very small way to the importance of place. And one of the reasons why we see so many different Indigenous languages, particularly, I think there are 34 different Indigenous languages in British Columbia, is because of that sense of place, that the language, when you talk to Indigenous people about their language, they say, we're the voice of the land, big L in the sense of land and water. And their language, their vocabulary, their nuances in their language come as a specific reflection to where the particular place in which they live and work. There's a West Coast, I think it's Neutralith, people in western side of Vancouver Island that in fact talk about, have a name for settlers, and the translation of their name is driftwood. We go from place to place without really landing, really being and acknowledging and honoring the place where we are. If we did acknowledge and honor the place where we live, then we wouldn't see the systematic and ongoing destruction of the environment that in fact we perpetuate on an ongoing basis. That's a reflection of not being in the place where you live. And so thank you, Manuel, for that opening. I appreciated that very much. I wasn't able to attend all the sessions because I had other commitments, and there's a 3-hour time difference. And so, but I also want to give thanks to Isadora and Grace. Thank you too for your notes that you provided. I really appreciated that. Catherine for all of her work. Andrea, I know that I've attended and managed and overseen many conferences in my day, and I know all the hard work that people behind the scenes do, and I want to as they would say here, I want to say Heshka, put my hands up and say thank you for all of your hard work. Um, but there are some themes, and I'd like to just go for a second back to Andrew's opening remarks, because I think that he said a couple of things that really struck me. One of which was, and it was referred to by, I think, Jean-Marc earlier this morning, about the whole issue of capital. And it's really putting, it's basically that old joke about the commitment. Who has, if you're having bacon and eggs, there's a commitment by the chicken in terms of laying the eggs, but the pig makes a very different kind of commitment when it comes to the bacon that goes with the eggs, and the separation of that. Really, that slice of bacon is what we're asking. We're asking people to really look seriously at their privilege and the longstanding access or inability to access by capital, by groups that have been systematically and over a long term, being basically erased from our conversation. And although, for example, a good example is the initiative taken by the Black community groups with the report Unfunded that came out last December. So this is December 2020. And it was a Black-led organization and group of organizations that spearheaded that. So what struck me was that wasn't a question we were asking. As a white person, as a white settler, as a white dominated kind of, let's say, institutions and so forth, why aren't we asking those questions? Why are we responding to those marginalized questions only when, in fact, we're prodded or poked and so forth? And I think that speaks to my own journey that I've been through. I won't go into detail in terms of my own decolonization journey, but one of the themes too is that aspect of self-reflection. Where are we? Every single one of us is an author of some dimension of inequality and racism within our own lives. The decisions that we make, what we do, whether we speak up or not, whether we ask some really tough questions about who's at a decision-making table and who isn't, who we hire and why, what kind of research we're engaged in and so forth, who do we involve with, and that brings me to, I guess, another kind of theme, and that was one about, is there a shift that's actually really taking place now? And some people said, yes, there's a shift. Maybe there's a shift. We'll find out if there's a shift. What I would propose is that there are, in this moment, probably two competing narratives. One being the body of narrative around, we want to create a new normal. We want to make significant changes to address inequalities and marginalization and so forth within our society. The other narrative is, I can't wait to get back to normal. I can't wait to take that trip. I can't wait to fly. I can't wait to do this. And those two narratives, I think, are something that we need to pay some real attention to, because they play out in, I would say, three dimensions: a political dimension, a structural dimension, and a functional direction. In where we work, where we play, our foundations, our research, and so forth. And you'll see it in the media, those things we see. And I think that we can define it, but I think there's a real there's a comfort, because there's a degree of comfort that nostalgic view of, I want to get back to normal. I want to get back to the way things were. Um, and this is a very normal part of a crisis and crisis sort of adaptation and management. So I'm just saying that that's a way I think we need to look at that, what we see in front of us on an ongoing basis in a very real way. Um, the um, um, the other sort of theme that I want to touch on is what I would call 360-degree funding or surround funding. And I think we need to think about that we think about, you're not only, how many foundations are doing 360-degree funding. That is, they're funding even if they're funding a project, are they funding the project? Are they funding the organization? Are they funding the community? Are they funding the society? Are they providing, in fact, that surround support that, in fact, provides the opportunity for very real, meaningful work to take place? And I'm really glad to have seen that the whole issue of project funding and its time-limited dimension has really been driven to the fore during the last 3 days. And I think that is very much a part of, as Jean-Marc said, that starvation cycle that comes in. So I'll give you an example. Again, I'll go back to when I was executive director of the Ontario Public Health Association. And that was that we received a relatively small sustaining grant from the Minister of Grant. I think $25,000 a year we initially got from the Ministry of Health. If I went out and got project funding, I would have to get somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 in project funding to, in fact, recoup that $25,000 over which I had total discretion. So you tell me, where the cost benefit is in terms of, providing even a relatively small amount of, core sustainable funding. The opportunity cost for any organization to get that equivalent is absolutely phenomenal. And the cost associated with chasing that kind of projects on an ongoing basis really keeps people very much as David's racing car thing, basically spinning in the right place, using all the energy but not getting anywhere. And I think people need to be called out on that and in terms of funders. And it's one of those things where it's if not us, who? If not when? Why not now? Kind of thing. Because it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve us as researchers. It doesn't serve foundations. It doesn't serve communities, and it doesn't serve society. The last thing I'd like to touch on briefly, or I guess maybe the second last thing, is maybe a bit more philosophical. That is, are we actually asking the right questions? And again, coming back to Andrew's opening remarks about coming to the point of who's really benefiting here. If we're not addressing anything in terms of power inequities, if we're not prepared to really examine who we are, and then that's where does that take us in terms of asking the right questions? The second part of that is, are the right people asking the right questions? Are we as researchers, as university, are we the people that actually are we the ones that should be even asking the questions? Maybe not. Maybe in fact, it's the communities that need to be asking the questions, not us. And for those of you, my PhD is in community development, so you know where I'm going with that. In terms of the importance of bringing community in at the center of that and genuinely listening. And that brings us back to the whole importance of relationship. And we, in the last discussion and everything else, and if you're talking to, Indigenous scholars, Indigenous communities, well, first of all, they'll say, and scholars have written about this, is, research is one of the dirtiest words in Indigenous communities, because they've been researched at and to, but never with, or very infrequently with. And all of that is the basis of relationship building. And I would say that unless we're committed, and unless foundations are committed to genuinely building a very different kind of relationship with the communities that they'd like to see a difference made in, then we have to really ask ourselves whether that's money worth receiving or not. And so who's asking the questions, and are we asking the right ones? I'm going to finish with just a comment about the power of stories. And I think that we have heard a lot of stories over the last 3 days, and thanks to Catherine, over the next couple of weeks or so, the stories, the presentations that we've heard over the last 3 days will be posted on the Ontario Hub website for people to revisit those stories. And I'd really like you to think about either a person or a moment that really struck you, that you'd like to go back, whether that's one of David's slides or whatever the case may be, or a comment, because we find ourselves in very different places at different times. And the opportunity to go back and hear a story again is really important to see it in a different kind of context. And as we go through our own self-reflection, because as the work, for example, that the Circle on Philanthropy and Aboriginal people do with foundations and others, all of their work starts with self-reflection. And we think, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about the changes that we're seeing in society, the changes that we'd like to see out there. Fundamentally, the first step towards seeing those changes is to see yourself and to see your own context and how you walk on the land and through society, and what contribution and what you carry with you as you go forward. So I'd like you to think about that, and I'll end with those remarks. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring these closing remarks.